sever the nerve of Unitarianism and it dies, may it rest in peace. That language had me a little miffed. So don't be me, folks. Be Dale. Pick up the pen when you get a chance. Like, what's wrong with you, Brandon?
Welcome to the Unitarian Christian Alliance podcast, episode 77, Four Views Panel Debrief, Evangelical Theological Society, with Dale Tuggy and Brandon Duke. I'm Mark Kane. If you, like me, think this upcoming Four Views book is going to be a serious pendulum swinger, then you'll enjoy this. It's a behind-the-scenes talk with Dale and Brandon, who were at the conference, the lone Unitarians, adrift in the sea of Trinitarians. Have you not heard of the upcoming Four Views book? Well, we talk about it at the start of the interview. And not heard of the panel discussion at the Evangelical Theological Society? Well, there's a link to the YouTube recording of it in the show notes. And even better, check out Dale Tuggy's podcast, Trinities, where he goes through it with commentary. Basically, it was a mini debate, opening statements from each author, and some Q&A. If you haven't heard the panel discussion yet, don't worry. I think this episode will give you a good sense for what took place, and when you do hear it, you'll appreciate it even more. Theology is fascinating. You may notice that around the UCA water cooler, Trinitarianism and Unitarianism comes up a lot. Surprised? Well, you shouldn't be. The UCA effort is geared toward that one thing, so it's usually the topic. Note, however, that in our lives, this should be a mere sliver of what we do. If you only hang out in contexts where we talk theology, you might think that's all that matters to us. That's called a sampling bias. Don't fall for it. You and I, we have many important things in our lives. There's probably less than 1% of folks who, like Dale Tuggy, write on the topic extensively. For the rest of us, it's just one part of our faith experience. Now, if you've been excommunicated for asking the wrong questions of your pastor, well, then it's a painfully swollen part of your faith experience. But still, in the end, it's not the whole of your faith. Even though Jesus put it at the top of his list of what is the most important commandment, quoting the Shema in Mark 12:29, it's not the whole of your faith. It's not the gospel. It's just clarity on who the God is that we serve and on this human whom God raised from the dead and seated at his right hand. It's easy, especially when you are attacked for your less than Chalcedonian and rather un-Catholic beliefs, it's easy to get caught up in these discussions. It can be overwhelming. So, a gentle reminder. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. James 1:26 and 27. And now, a moment's break from your real work of living and walking like Jesus in this mess of a world. Here's a quick set of intros before our roundtable. Dale Tuggy earned a PhD in philosophy from Brown University and was a professor for 18 years. He hosts the Trinities podcast. He's published many papers, and he is the author of the book, What is the Trinity? He's on the UCA board. Brandon Duke also serves as a volunteer on the UCA board, and he's on the social media subcommittee, helping curate the YouTube channel and moderate the UCA Facebook group. Yeah, I know, the poor soul. He has a blog, truthborn.org, where he shares his passion for Christian theology, apologetics, and philosophy. And I'm Mark Kane. I have a bachelor's of theology from Atlanta Bible College. I serve at my local church in several ways, none of which involve arguing theology, mind you. Shocker, I know. I have a bachelor's in computer science and currently work as a privacy officer in a medical software company. I grew up a Unitarian, and I'm blessed to be able to host this podcast, where I meet amazing people like you. So where do we even begin with this? You guys have been in Texas at an event that turned out to be quite interesting, like fascinating. So interesting, I came off of my podcast hiatus just to get you guys on and talk about it.
Good luck getting me to stop talking about it.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Dale, for taking this last-minute effort and joining me here on the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
We might need to go back and explain why you were even at this Texas event before we even explain what this Texas event was. And that has to do with this book that's coming out.
And the book has to do with a friendship, and the friendship has to do with an old article of mine. So I think it was about 2004. I wrote this article that has the words divine deception in the title. And the argument is basically that if God is just a group of three divine persons, it looks like those three divine persons would have deceived the Jews because they keep talking in the first person singular and appearing like a man on a throne and things like this. And I mean, that seems like wrongful deception. I make an analogy. A girl thinks that she has an adoptive father that lives far away and only visits once in a while. She sees him once a year. And then like when she's full grown, she finds out that it was three grown men just taking turns visiting her, calling on the phone, like, identical triplets or something.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be wrong, I published this article back in 2004, and I ended up on the basis of this meeting a student at Calvin College named Chad McIntosh. I think he was assigned this in a class by one of his professors, and he was thinking about it. He did a blog post or two about it. He eventually ended up publishing a paper on it in which he suggests something kind of unique. I call it a four-self Trinity theory, that there are three persons and then they make up a fourth, like, collective person. And so anyway, we had corresponded about that, and at one time he called himself my nemesis, but really we're friends.
Okay.
I like talking with him, and we stay in touch, and every once in a while I'll visit him. So
is the lesson there, don't make enemies of everybody you meet?
yeah, sure.
I mean, it worked out because of where this led to.
So where I'm going is he thought there should be a Four Views book about the Trinity. He and I had both been aware that, I think it was Zondervan, published another Four Views book on the Trinity, and it was terrible. It had theologians, not philosophers, and the editor lumped them together, so it was like 2 versus 2. And it was terrible. And we both thought it was terrible. And he said, well, there should be another Four Views book, and I think you ought to be in it. And then, these Trinitarians can show what's wrong with your view, obviously. So he eventually proposed this book and got it accepted with a publisher. And a lot of times when analytic philosophy-trained philosophers argue about things like Trinity and incarnation, sometimes it's more theoretical than Bible-oriented. And he wanted this book to be a more Bible-oriented argument.
Okay.
So that influenced the people that he picked. William Lane Craig, the most famous apologist in the world, who's a very accomplished Christian philosopher, famous for all kinds of things, including whooping atheists in debates.
Yeah.
He can be beaten, but he's a ferocious debater.
He's so famous, they don't even call him by his full name. He's just WLC.
Yep. He does a great job defending the existence of God versus atheists. He's published on lots of other things. The second guy is Wlliam Hasker, who is a very accomplished older Christian philosopher, famous for publishing on open theism, has probably the best developed three-self or social Trinity theory that's out there as expressed in this book. If you want to hear about that, you can look up Hasker on the Trinities podcast. I've interviewed him about that.
Okay.
Third guy is Beau Branson. He's a little bit younger than me, got his PhD under some excellent philosophers at the University of Notre Dame. And he's made some important contributions to the conversations about different Trinity theories and kind of how they're related to each other and how to understand the difficult Cappadocian fathers like Gregory of Nyssa and Gregory of Nazianzus. And then he picked me, the heretic. So
to round out the four, right?
Yeah. What's interesting to me is that the three people besides you are all in some form or another traditional, even though, they have differences, but none of them would be, they're all card-carrying Trinity Club members.
Yes.
They're all in the Trinity Club, but Branson thinks the one God is the Father,
Yep.
not the Trinity. And then there are these two divine persons that are equal to the Father.
Okay.
So he calls that monarchical Trinitarianism. I call it subordinationist Unitarianism.
Okay.
And Craig and Hasker they're a little bit too close. I mean, they obviously talked before we started writing the book. And Hasker was like, I'll handle most of the Trinity stuff. And you beat Dale up about the deity of Christ mostly. And so in his chapter, William Lane Craig picked kind of the standard 7 passages where God, the word theos in Greek, is allegedly applied to Jesus. And then he argued for one more. These are all difficult passages, either difficult because of interpretation or translation, or even just the text.
And by difficult, what Dale means is you shouldn't build a doctrine on them because there's all kinds of problems with them.
Right.
Difficult is nice philosopher speak for don't use these as the basis for your argument.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then Chad McIntosh proposed a book session at the meeting of the Evangelical Philosophical Society, which is jointly held with the meeting of the Evangelical Theological Society. And so these are conservative evangelical organizations. To be a member, you have to agree not only to the Trinity, but to inerrancy. And in the past, you couldn't present, I think, without being a member or attend. At some point, they changed that because I presented back in 2018, and that was well received. But
So the abbreviation, that's ETS for Evangelical Theological Society and EPS for Evangelical Philosophical Society. And which one was the overarching?
ETS is the big one. It has seminary professors, pastors, and just evangelicals interested in theology and apologetics.
Okay.
The EPS is smaller. That's mostly philosophy professors and grad students. And there's kind of 3 crowds that are encompassed at this meeting. One is the systematic theology and Bible nerds. That's the ETS.
Okay.
And then there's the apologetics aficionados. Some of them are professional apologists. Others are lay people interested in apologetics. And they kind of mix in both circles. And then there are the philosophers.
My favorite category.
Yeah, that's the crowd I prefer the most. I think all the sessions I went to were EPS.
Okay. So how long had you been working on this book?
I think we started writing it about the end of last year, and then we've been writing it all year. We each had an opening statement, and then we had to reply to the other 3. So everybody got critiqued by the other 3.
Okay.
And then we had to write a closing in which we insanely tried to respond to 3 PhDs beating us up in only 3,000 words, which is about 2 or 3 newspaper editorials worth of words.
Right.
That was hard.
So you had to respond to all 3 of them, basically, whereas individually, they didn't have as many things to argue with against each other.
Yeah, Craig and Hasker, they did a little bit of patting each other on the back because their views are fairly close in some ways.
So the challenge was on, Dale. The gauntlet was big and it slammed the ground in front of you.
Yeah, the challenge was on, and William Lane Craig got a bit aggressive in his response to me.
Inside the book chapters.
Yeah, he kind of heaped some scorn on me. So I knew that this was going to be an interesting interaction. And frankly, it's a little nerve-wracking when you're going to get up in front of 200 people and most of them disagree with you, and you're going to have 3 very smart PhDs punching at you. I did a lot of preparation. I might have over-prepared slightly.
Well, let's set the stage for the room. So you go to the conference. Now, this is what's interesting to me. You 2 went together. This was in Texas. And as of recording, it was just like last week, November 14th through 16th. And you're going there as outsiders. Not very many people in our circles have ever been to an evangelical conference of brain people, if you know what I mean. What is it like?
Well, it was different for Brandon and for me.
Yeah. Well, it'd be a little bit like if Dak Prescott invited me to go into the Cowboys locker room and hang out with the rest of the Cowboys that I've been following, and then afterwards got to hang out with him at dinner. That's what it's like for me. These people are people that are like, I'm a big nerd, so I'm reading these folks, and so I'm walking around. Oh, look over there. There's Chad McIntosh. Oh, look over there. There's Ryan Mullins. Oh, look over there. There's Peter Van Den Wagen. So I was like a kid in a candy store or something, and but also having to remember, you hold something that is specifically not allowed to be here based on their statement for membership. Dale's there as a guest speaker, and I'm there as just an interested layperson. So there's that personal context, and then trying to be there to help Dale with what he's about to tackle.
Yeah, it was fantastic to have Brandon there. He just came to support me and be a part of the whole thing. And I was aware that I was going to be facing a hostile crowd, but at the same time, there are a lot of scholars there who I follow and appreciate. I'm not going to mention most of them because I'm not sure they'd appreciate me mentioning them.
You don't want to be on Dale's list.
Yeah. I mean, one I'll call out. I'm a known fanboy of the Reluctant Theologian podcast with Dr. Ryan Mullins. That, to me, is the best analytic theology podcast. If you don't know what analytic theology is, or you wonder what on earth philosophy should have to do with theology, just listen to that podcast and it will tell you.
Okay.
There's a lot of humility, but careful, clear, deep analysis and charitable interpretations of opponents. He was there. He's one of the several people that I really enjoyed.
I like his podcast because the sound quality is good.
Yeah.
Mark, it's worth mentioning, Dale talked about some of the sort of sociological divides within this group of folks based on their different specialties. And something I noticed is just the intense interest and even respect that's extended to Dale by the philosopher types that have read his stuff and tried to interact with it. They don't agree with him, but they're interested to interact with them. And they all have sort of this methodology, this approach towards how you're supposed to do that. It's admirable. It's this thing where you're going to say, I want to make sure I understand what your view is. And I can do that over lunch if I need to. And we can share a slice of pizza or something. And how are you doing, et cetera, et cetera. And hey, here's a question that's a probing question, and give Dale an opportunity to respond to it. And it's the right way, I think, for Christians or just people in general to interact. And that was something really fun to watch. There's also kind of, I don't know if you've heard the term theobro before, but there's that too that exists. But the majority of what I saw wasn't that. It was people that are courteous and they want the truth. And so they have this sort of approach they've been trained to take to that, this approach to ask questions that are insightful and then interact and trying to get to the bottom of the other guy's arguments. It's pleasant to be a part of, to say the least, compared to what you tend to see online,
Yeah, I mean, everybody there was really kind and courteous and welcoming, honestly.
Yeah.
The only one who was a bit hard on me was Dr. William Lane Craig in the session. But I don't take that personally. I mean, he thinks that I'm literally leading people to hell. So he feels the need to kind of put me in my place a little bit. I understand. Maybe if I thought that about him, I would be mean to him slightly. But yeah, I mean, what Brandon said is true. People trained in philosophy, they're trained to judge things carefully and slowly and to listen first and make sure you understand what their views are and why they hold them before you pop off and start refuting them. It makes for good conversations. There were a few people that told me after my presentation, hey, that was interesting. You gave me some things to think about there. I mean, I was trying to.
Yeah.
I will say this. I've never heard this before talking to Dale. In the philosophy world, someone picking you as their target and saying how wrong you are at length in a paper or a book is the greatest compliment they could possibly pay you. Because the biggest insult is to ignore you completely because your arguments are bad or they're not worth their time. So the greatest compliment that someone can pay you is to put your picture on their wall and throw the darts at it, while they're writing their book. That's the way they operate, and it's neat.
Yeah.
So just a guess, how many of the EPS, the philosophy people, knew who you were, Dale, when you got there?
Well, I mean, and the people in the session, probably most of them, I would imagine.
Well, and based on the amount of whispering as he would walk by, I would say it's most too.
Yeah, and I mean, some people would come up and say, hey, I've been listening to your podcast for years. I think it's really helpful. I talked to one guy, he teaches patristics at a college or a seminary or something, and he likes it.
Wow.
because I'm not kind of ramming my views down your throat all the time, I do get a good number of Trinitarian listeners, sometimes because I'm interviewing Trinitarians, but sometimes because I'm talking about origin or something, and they know I'm going to give an interesting take on it. So, yeah, I don't know. I seem to be getting pretty notorious, I guess, is the answer.
Okay. So this session then, describe the room and the crowd, just the vibe of this. It isn't every day you get to sit with Wlliam Lane Craig and explain your views to a room full of hostile parties.
Well, I'll let Brandon take the play-by-play in a second, but part of the reason why I was nervous is a couple days before the conference, I found out that Wlliam Lane Craig was going to have a professional film guy there to film it, which means it's going to immediately get blasted out to his Reasonable Faith YouTube channel. Right, so that really puts more pressure on. Is somebody going to pants you, and everybody you'll see your undies on YouTube forever, basically.
Yeah.
I'll let Brandon set the scene.
Yeah, this is a hostile event, meaning hostile to Unitarianism, in its very charter. I mean, they didn't pick 15 things that you had to hold to be a part of the ETS or EPS. There's 2, and one of them is the Trinity.
Oh, wow.
In their short version, yeah.
So it's a room full of people that have agreed to that as part of their membership, and a book where 3 out of the 4 views are defending the Trinity that's going to be recorded and shared by one of the greatest apologists of our time on his, social media channel. And, Dale gets to walk up to the front, sit behind a table with the other 3 gents, and they say, okay, go, make your case. So we just brought an audio recorder. If the video comes out elsewhere, we'll certainly point people to it. And I should also mention, I'm the one that took the terrible picture using my cell phone that's on the thumbnail on the video on our YouTube channel. So that's my bad too. I'm better at listening to analytic theologians than I am using the camera on my phone.
For the record, I was not wearing all black. I had a dark maroon shirt on. That's right. So it fooled the camera.
I've seen some memes since then where they've taken pictures of Johnny Cash and photoshopped Dale's face on them as the man in black. So sorry for that, Dale.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what's interesting to me is this is a panel of the 4 authors of a book that has not yet been released. We'll have this panel so that what? What was the idea?
It's kind of a teaser, There were a couple other sessions at the conference that were similar. In fact, one was on the incarnation, and they were just barely starting to write theirs.
Okay.
It's trying to circulate the ideas in brief, listenable form to get people thinking and hopefully get them to buy the book. And
in addition to promotion, the point of these interactions is to advance the pursuit of truth. The setup of these is to, take, say, 2 authors of books that are interacting with each other. And they're going to give their view, but then they're also going to have respondents. They're going to have other people in the field that are experts on the same topic critique those 2 authors, and then give those authors a chance to respond. So there's often content that you wouldn't get inside the book that occurs at these conferences. And it's all just in the pursuit of, iron sharpening iron kind of a thing, where the more interaction with the experts you get, the better the outcome is. And I have no doubt, I've seen it happen just even this week. There are exchanges where one side or the other goes, you didn't change my mind, but that was a good point. I'm going to have to modify that, in my chapter in my upcoming book or whatever.
Well, the content of your discussion occasionally drifted into references that only the people who've seen the book would understand, like tea.
Yeah,
and
true.
And I was like, were they given any instructions like, hey, maybe avoid that, or just go for it?
No, I mean, we were all trying to communicate, but it's a bunch of analytic philosophers. So sometimes we turn into technical scumbags and just kind of talk in the technical ways that we're accustomed to. So we're not all equally good at, general communication.
I heard a few people listen to the video and, what so-and-so was saying was very confusing. But in fairness or in charity to that person, he was referring to some of the content that was in the book that was explained much more fully in the book. So,
Mark, to your point, this is a science, what they're doing. And so it has its terminology and its jargon and its technical terms. And, sometimes these guys even invent technical terms to clarify something. So I admire this field because, we relate to people pushing the envelope in higher, further, faster. Let's go to, the moon. Let's go to Mars. This is the equivalent of that in the world of ideas, I think. And so in some sense, these guys they're rocket scientists, but of our deepest questions. So how do you not get excited about going to a conference like that? And
Yeah, right. I mean,
Mark, you're right that I think for an average person, hearing these little 10-minute speeches, 3/4 of the time, they'll be like, what on earth? I'll give a little bit more context on my podcast.
okay.
But I mean, the short version is Wlliam Hasker kind of gave an overview of his three-self Trinity theory. He was maybe pretty coherent. William Lane Craig said some very confusing things about the Trinity and then attacked me for not answering all his deity of Christ proof texts. Beau Branson kind of got up and made a bunch of technical points, although he did mention that really he was discussing Gregory of Nyssa's view, because in his view, that's a paradigm of an orthodox view, and he doesn't think the other guys have a fully orthodox view. And then me, I kind of gave like a forceful little manifesto for biblical Unitarianism and discussed 5 of my 20 facts that I claim favor the thesis that the New Testament authors are Unitarian over the thesis that the New Testament authors are Trinitarian.
Yeah. Well, I was on the edge of my seat there because in my head, I was imagining the room. How many were in the room?
About 200 with some standing in the back.
Oh, I'm just imagining these 200 people listening to the simple expression of your view, Dale. And I'm thinking, some of these people have really not dealt with this yet.
Yeah.
And I think
some, like 98%, maybe 99%.
It's hidden. I mean, William Lane Craig's perspective that you shouldn't be there, that like getting close to Dale is
dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That doesn't facilitate the same kind of discussion that you were describing from the philosophical side. So I was excited for the possibility of all of these people hearing it in an environment where they can't just close the book, walk away, say, they're stuck in there. They get all 10 minutes of Dale.
Judging by the questions, I got their attention all right. I knew there was some things that most of them probably hadn't heard, like the point about the New Testament pattern of worship. The Trinity's never worshipped, the Spirit's never worshipped. It's mainly the Father, also the Son, but you worship the Son to the glory of the Father. And this just doesn't fit the authors being Trinitarians at all. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I would wager that was the first time most of them had heard a point like that, except for my co-authors. The questions were, one friend described them as attempts to dunk. Just like, hey, man, not on the Trinity, but really more on the deity of Christ, come on, it's obvious, and here's why, this verse here. And I kind of bat it back like, no, that's not obvious. Next.
Yeah. It was pretty clear that Dale was persona non grata in that crowd because everything was targeted at Dale. Like when everybody had their Q&A session, all the other speakers could ask questions of everybody else. Dale never got left out. Like nobody forgot to ask Dale a question. He was the target. And then when the attendees in the room stood up, they asked questions of Dale. All but one question, I think, was all to Dale. That was amazing.
But again, I mean, when I talk to them, honestly, they're friendly. It's just that it's part of evangelical tradition, not so much the Trinity, but that the deity of Christ is not only true, not only scriptural, but it's obvious. And so if someone denies it, I mean, something must be wrong with them. Maybe they're spiritually blind. Maybe they're stupid. Maybe they haven't read the Bible. Maybe they're a liberal. They think they know better than the Bible. I don't know. So that here I am saying, no, I don't think that's obvious at all. Like they just all felt the need to correct me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, thank you. That's a nice thing to do. If you think I have this error that's going to send me to hell. Yeah. And I don't take it personally,
Yeah, don't you think it's a natural urge to help? It's an outworking of just an evangelistic inclination, is to say, well, hold on, here's an obvious verse that is going to help you, sir. Mm-hmm. When there's a Unitarian response, then they're confused. They're like, wait, I haven't heard that before. And either you're twisting it or you're right. So it's like somebody dropping a big rock in the middle of the lake that had been placid, and all of a sudden there's these ripples, and they're trying to grapple with them. In general, I think people, their urge is to correct and to be helpful. And then you find out about people's character. right? When they realize that there's more to it and they're going to have to work a little harder. You know, they're not changing their view, but they're like, okay, if I'm going to persuade this person, I have to work harder. Some people are like, I'm going to go read, I'm going to go prepare so I can come back. Or I'm going to ask clarifying questions so that then I can be better prepared to respond. Other people with, in my opinion, less epistemic courage, they turn to attack the person, which is a less honorable thing to do. And mostly we saw the first, especially among the people that are trained to do that. You know, there's a move you can make, which is to say, I don't agree with you, but I don't know how to refute you right now. So I'm going to go back and work on it. I mean, as a Unitarian, like, what better than that could we want? People don't change their minds about things like this in a 5-minute conversation. It takes months or years.
Yeah, nor should they.
Right. It's too important. So I think this is, bridges connect both banks of the river. For the EPS to extend an invitation to Dale, and, I don't know if there's internal politics where that was a risk for anybody, or if will be fallout from Dale being there. I don't know, but I hope that the people that had the courage to engage in the conversation, to promote the book, I hope that they're seen it with charity and admired like they should be by their peers, instead of, people just circling the wagons to keep out, sort of dangerous thoughts. But I hope that what they'll say is, well, we want to save this brother who's wrong about this, and these thousands and thousands of Unitarians that agree, we'd like to help them. And the best way we can help them is to engage with them and understand their arguments. I mean, if I were an evangelical Trinitarian, that's what I'd want to do. And so hopefully the bridge stays open. I don't know. It'll be up to them.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping and praying. And speaking of praying, I told you all the reasons I was nervous going into this. And so I wouldn't say I was afraid, but I was a little wound up for the couple of weeks going into this. I spent a lot of time preparing. We had a short 5-minute period where we could ask prepared questions of one another. So I spent way too much time coming up with way too many questions. And I only asked like 1/4 or 1/5 of them. I slept okay the night before. I got up, I had a headache that wouldn't go away. Brandon heroically goes out and gets me some Advil at the drugstore, which solved that. I mean, I'm not freaking out or anything, but, I'm still wound a little tight. When I get there and sit down in the place, I am supernaturally calm. Not like I was drugged, but like I couldn't have been more calm if I was just sitting there relaxing on the couch watching a football game. And the reason is because people were praying for me at the time. My wife, my church, some of the allegiance to the king people later told me that they were praying, and it really helped. And I listened to the tape the other day, and I was like, man, I sound as cool as a cucumber, because I was not wound up in the slightest. And it helped because you have to think on your feet kind of fast. And I was really grateful for how the whole thing went, and grateful for those prayers. I did flub one question. My friend, Dr. Beau Branson, asked me a question. I just couldn't follow what he was saying. I'll give him a better answer on my podcast when I present it.
That's good.
Well, Dale's super calm. Meanwhile, my Apple Watch is saying, hey, your heart rate's up over 120 and you're not doing anything. Are you okay? I was so nervous about it that apparently it was like I was exercising.
Yeah.
So.
The prayers just resulted in all of Dale's nerves being redirected and absorbed by you.
I would sign up for that. That's a service I can provide, is to sit over here and be nervous.
So, Brandon, what was your moment from that whole presentation? Did you have like just one thing that really stood out for you?
Yeah. So, well, there's something that Wlliam Lane Craig said that we can talk about later if you want. There was a second thing, and this is maybe my favorite part of the whole presentation, is Dale at the end of his 10 minutes made a joke about, hey, some of you all may not agree with me. And the room was silent for about half a second, and I was like, ha ha ha, and the whole room cracks up. They're like, oh, it's a joke. It's okay. We can laugh.
I'm a believer in restorationism, a more thoroughgoing Protestantism. Sometimes a minority report turns out to be correct. Do you believe in congregational church governments, the priesthood of all believers, believers' baptism? If so, you agree with me that sometimes God allows mainstream Christianity to stray from the truth, even for long periods of time. It's time to restore New Testament monotheism, putting confused and confusing Trinity speculations into the same category as the papacy and transubstantiation. Now, perhaps a few of you here disagree. Nonetheless, you should have some sympathy for fellow Protestants who agree with everything proclaimed in Acts. This disagreement should be looked at more like the Arminian Calvinist divide and less like the Gnostic mainstream divide. The most Bible-oriented Protestants, I mean Trinitarian ones, practically ignore traditional Trinity speculations in their worship and practice. We just go a step further, going back to the sources and finding that they make better sense without those extra, later layers of tradition. Thank you.
I don't know what people thought of it in the room, but I wonder how many people that came up afterwards and were charitable, it pricked their conscience too. Hopefully it's something we can internalize and use in our discussions with the Trinitarians. Like, hey, here's where we're coming from. So even if we disagree, here's why. I mean, Mark, you've told me a story about a fella, or maybe it's been in the podcast, a neighbor that's kind of ended up in that same boat with you, right?
Yeah, my neighbor who eventually just had to concede. This Mark fellow is a Christian. He just believes in God in a different way than I do, and I can't argue him out of it. What do you do when you get to the point where this person is not crazy? He's not twisting up his scriptures, and he lives a life that is demonstrating the lordship of Christ. What do you do with these people? You just dismiss them out of hand? Eventually it's hard to do that.
And when a guy like Dale is present, I watched him during the week, and I'm going to tell this story because I'm telling on myself. So I watched Dale be incredibly charitable to Wlliam Lane Craig the whole week, both in their interactions, during the talk, but even an interaction or two after. And he never wavers from either the pursuit of truth in an honest way or from treating his interlocutor with courtesy and trying to steelman their arguments. Me, on the other hand, I watched Bill Craig do his 10-minute talk, and then he sits down at his chair and is moving his stuff around, and he accidentally knocks his pen off the table and onto the ground. And I see it, and my first instinct is, oh, I'm 8 feet away. I'll pick that up and set it back on the table for him. And I sat there for a moment, and I said, no, you're about to take notes on what Dale's going to say. You don't get your pen. And I sat there and let him go without his pen.
Brandon.
He was feeling a little defensive of me at that moment.
I was.
Because like I said, he kind of got a little aggressive.
Yeah, the daggers in the heart of Unitarianism line and the sever the nerve of Unitarianism and it dies, may it rest in peace. That language had me a little miffed. So don't be me, folks. Be Dale. Don't let it get to you. Pick up the pen when you get a chance. Like, what's wrong with you, Brandon?
Yeah. About interacting with Dr. Craig, the thing he emphasized in his presentation was my claim that according to the New Testament, the Father and God are one and the same. In philosophers speak, they're numerically identical. He was saying that, no, you can't possibly read the New Testament that way because that concept is an anachronism. Right, just like you can't read Matthew or John saying something about the internet because they didn't have that concept. You can't read Matthew or John as saying something about this concept of numerical identity, such as the Father just is God. And I pushed back on that in the session a little bit, and I had an interesting interaction with him later, which I'll describe on my podcast.
Oh, a teaser.
Yeah. In brief, in one sentence, I don't see how he can get away from thinking that, yes, ancient people did know how to say this just is the same thing as that.
Yeah, Dale, can you clarify for us, like as just a layman, what was going on there? Because it seemed like it was key to his whole case. It was like, this is the right way to read the Bible so that you can understand it correctly.
So he was talking about logicians, and you have to understand that logics are artificial languages, like computer programming languages. They're trying to represent what we say in our ordinary languages so that you can construct and evaluate arguments in a precise manner. And in modern logics, we have this identity symbol. It's the same as the equal sign in mathematics. So in ancient times, they didn't have this algebraic kind of artificial language of logic that uses the equal symbol to mean identity. That's true, but you don't have to have that machinery to have the concept.
Isn't that just where if in the same paragraph you refer to the Father and then you switch it to God and then you go back to the Father, the reason that you don't think that's going to confuse your reader is because you know that everybody understands that you can alternate the words and it will not be baffling.
Or you'll see them alternate between Jesus and Christ, for instance.
Yeah.
So whenever you have co-referring terms, you could say A equals B. Christ just is the Son.
Right.
God just is the Father. They're one and the same.
If I'm understanding him right, what Craig was saying about identity, he's saying that we would need to read the New Testament as if we didn't have this modern conception of identity in order to understand them correctly. And if that's true, that seems like a hermeneutical framework, some kind of process for reading the New Testament that nobody else engages in.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for like the perspicuity of the Bible, right? I mean, for people to just be able to read it and understand it, if we have to sort of unlearn some supposed mental technology that developed, centuries after the apostles, it seems like a ridiculous claim to me on the surface. But if you think about it, if it is a ridiculous claim, he's being pushed to it based on Dr. Tuggy's pressing him on the New Testament. The New Testament, it sounds like, if you hold a basic view of identity that we all share, teaches Unitarianism.
Yeah.
I mean, if removing it is a dagger in the heart of Unitarianism, then it seems like including it is support for Unitarianism. So I just think maybe Dr. Craig is making a claim that he really shouldn't. But he's doing it in response to the pressure that a Unitarian reading puts on him.
Yeah, I mean, look, people have this concept because they could figure out that Abram is Abraham, that those are one and the same.
Yeah.
So it's a desperate move. Most philosophers don't make this move, and I don't think it works. I think you're going to have to refute my argument another way.
The reason this book exists, Mark, I think, is because Dale's body of work presses people to find an answer that works against his arguments.
Yeah, I guess some of these philosophers think I'm worth refuting. I mean, you could have a 4 views, but it's not hard to find 4 different views of the Trinity, let me tell you. There's a lot more than 4 of them out there. You could have an 8 views on the Trinity book. But honestly, I'm honored to have these guys punching at me, It's for the sake of truth, and I think their intentions are good in that sense. And so I tried really hard, especially in my opening chapter, and it's up for the reader to decide if this really is a powerful overall case or if one of these other authors shows what's wrong with it.
Okay. So what happened? Like, now here you are, you've presented, people have heard your case, and now you've got still more time with them. You're walking around with them. Surely this is now part of the discussions and the interactions, right?
Well, Mark, yeah, it led to a lot of interesting conversations over lunch or dinner. For instance, I was talking with one friend about worship and, why don't I just think Jesus is obviously fully divine because he's worshiped? I try not to come at people, I'd rather build a friendship and let them mull over my book chapter and have that kind of have its effect. So, I want to know what they're working on. How are they doing?
Yeah.
How's the family? That kind of stuff.
How many of us persuade each other without having that kind of relationship first, right? We really listen to each other once there's some trust established. And it's got to go both ways. We got to really listen to each other. And I got to just be the fly on the wall, kind of the third wheel, and listen to some of these conversations. And, I gained from all of them. Like, there's something just inherently good about hearing both sides of a topic, over enchiladas. That never hurts. And some good salsa.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I think maybe Dale and I only had 2 meals by ourselves. And the rest of the time we had the pleasure of either joining people or getting invited along for lunches and dinners with other people in his field. There's an element of that that's just the courage to look somebody that you disagree with in the eye and treat them with courtesy and then talk about the thing you disagree with. But I kind of wonder if there isn't also some courage to sit with the very, very unpopular kid at the lunch table when everybody else is looking at you, especially if somebody as influential and respected as Wlliam Lane Craig won't do that with Dale. And I'll just call him out for that. But there were lots of other folks that did. They wanted to interact. And, I respect that they've got the courage and the sort of the backbone to engage with Dale, even though they disagree. And even if they may draw some heat for doing so from other people,
I don't think a lot of them were, being brave. Maybe. It depends. I mean, philosophers are accustomed to disagreements, and sometimes Christian philosophers that do philosophy of religion will just sit there and have a beer with their atheist colleague.
Yeah.
Philosophers tend not to think that just because you're being friendly to somebody that, you agree with everything they say.
Well, I guess that's the division that you described at the beginning. There are those who think this is an opportunity to discuss, and there's those who feel this is an enemy to be silenced.
Yeah.
Shut them down.
Yeah.
But there is a Christian common sense, though, Mark, that you mentioned before. Like, people detect the fruits of the Spirit in you, especially if they know your life a little bit. And so people are pulled in both ways. Tradition might say, oh, this is a terrible heretic, but then their kind of Christian instinct is, oh, this is just a Christian with a different theology. So there's a little bit of a war going on sometimes there.
And our relationships are complicated too. I mean, I got a chance to thank Bill Craig just for like 60 seconds, right? Because he's super busy and everybody wants a piece of him at a conference like this. People are lining up to talk to him. And I just got 60 seconds to say, hey, you like saved my life. Thanks. And then like move on. There was a period in my life where I wasn't sure what to think about God, whether God existed or not, or whether it was reasonable to think so. And I spent about 12 months reading and listening to everything that he'd ever written or said. And it turned me around. Like I genuinely own this deep debt of gratitude to the man. And you say that in 30 seconds in passing, and go in the corner and cry about how much it mattered to you. And leave off the half where, hey, you brought me to theism, but also you introduced me to the work of Dale Tuggy, who brought me to Unitarianism. So sorry about that. Didn't quite work out the way you wanted. But relationships are complex, and we can appreciate things about somebody, about their work, and be critical of other stuff. We got to be able to do both. And, when you can remember that, it makes it a lot easier to act in charity, like to remember to pick up their dang pen if they drop it.
Yeah, that's one of many reasons why I genuinely respect him. But, I respect a lot of the younger people there that I was talking with. I mean, they're doing good work in various ways. I'm not just trying to be this magnanimous, great guy. Like, no, it's not hard to like these people and find value in what they're doing.
Yeah.
They are dedicated to truth and the importance of thinking carefully about God and his son. And they're in the middle of their journey, just like we all are.
Let's just imagine some people would think, why engage in things like this? Just from a very high level. Like, what is the ultimate gain of convincing a room full of philosophers to at least consider a different theology? Because, there's varying types of people out there. Some of them are kind of anti-intellectual, like, even going to college and getting your degrees is just, what a waste of time. Go be Jesus. What do you see as the outcome, the benefit? Why do this kind of thing?
Well, part of what the UCA is doing is we want to get Unitarian Christian theologies on the map at all. And right now, they're widely ignored or just thought to be the domain of cultists and are not even worth refuting. So that's why people are finding out about these theological views, like for the first time when I'm up there saying them. But that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, if they know about Arminianism and Calvinism and open theism, why don't they know about different views about God and Christ? There's no good reason. It's just the Theological Academy has decided that people shouldn't be allowed to hear the best exponents of the other side. And then that's who trains the pastors. And so pastors don't know about it either. And I know that I can't convince my fellow panelists, and I'm not going to convince most of the people in the room, but honestly, I'd like them to read the book, and I'd like them to think over my 20 facts, which are mostly facts about the New Testament, like, for instance, how the word God is used or how they talk about Jesus. And once you get those facts in your head, every time you read the New Testament, something jumps out at you. For instance, Paul always sends greetings from the Father and the Son at the start of all his letters, never the Holy Spirit. Right? Every time you read a letter from Paul, now you're pondering this again. How come they never worship the Trinity? You're reading Revelation 4 and 5. Dang, So I want these facts to sink in, and the more they sink in, people will start to see the explanatory power of our way of looking at these things.
Yeah, to second the motion, anybody that listened to the Q&A, you get a sense, if you're Unitarian, that people hadn't run into this before. They hadn't heard our reading of their favorite proof text. They asked questions about, well, how could it be that the church could get this wrong? Shouldn't God be guiding the church? And that's an initial reaction to something you just haven't been exposed to or thought about before. Because as a Protestant, you think there's lots of stuff that the church has gotten wrong, and that's why we needed a Reformation.
Yeah.
And so why would the Reformation be perfect and have fixed every problem that has ever entered into the church? So the struggle here between these two ideas, these two ways of looking at God and Jesus, right now there's not a struggle. People aren't even aware of it. To me, the value of the work that Dr. Tuggy's been doing for so long, and especially this 4 Views book, is it puts that as one of the live options on the table for people. And at first they'll go, that's nuts. I don't agree with that. Let me read this chapter and see how dumb this is. But that's what Dr. Tuggy did for himself when he was going to school. I'm going to figure out which of these Trinity views is right. And he studied himself right out of them. So I think for us Unitarians, that's what we can hope for most, is that people become aware and they start studying on their own. We don't have to necessarily convince them. If we're right, when they read their Bible with the Trinitarian glasses taken off, they'll see it.
Yeah. I think all Unitarians think there are spiritual benefits to being unconfused about this. We give God the glory that's due him, and we give the Son of God the kind of glory that's due him. And now he's a perfect example for us because he's not necessarily omniscient and omnipotent and omnibenevolent and incapable of being tempted. But another way is, look, suppose there are people who aren't going to buy this Trinity and incarnation stuff, and yet they need to be born again. Well, our churches and our preachers give them an opportunity to do that without all those stumbling blocks. Maybe it matters for your critical thinkers or for Muslims or other types of people. Even if you're a Trinitarian, why shouldn't this kind of Christianity flourish if it results in actual discipleship?
Very good. So what's up next for this? The book has to be published, I guess, right?
The book still has to go through a fairly lengthy editing process at the hands of editor Dr. Chad McIntosh. So that's going to be at least several months, maybe more than 6 months down the line, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
I would say, Mark, that as far as the next stuff that people can look for from Dr. Tuggy, there's a debate that's going to be coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Debating James White in March and hoping to debate Robert M. Bowman Jr. sometime maybe in the summer, but that's not been set. We don't have a time or place or debate question.
I noticed a pattern as I was looking through some James White material online the other night on YouTube. It's surprising the number of videos related to him that have the word destroys in all caps in the title of the video. There's sort of a pattern there, and I'm not sure what to make of that. So
that's the Apologetics Bros editing technique.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Dale.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. It's been fun.
Again, Dale will be going through the panel discussion on his Trinities podcast. Do check that out. I've been out of podcasting commission for some time. Thank you for your patience. I did send out an email to those on the podcast newsletter about my hiatus, and if you're not getting that email, there's a link to sign up in the show notes or go to podcast.unitarianchristianalliance.org. And if you're a Trinitarian, sign up to keep your eye on what I'm up to. It's certainly no good, and you'll want to be the first to know.
My name is Damon Hughes. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas in the United States. I just want to thank Brother Kane for all his hard work and for his podcast. He has been an answered prayer, a truly answered prayer, because I prayed about finding where I belong and finding understanding and truth and knowledge, and God has delivered that to me through the podcast and through the UCA. And I look forward to all the future podcasts, and I look forward to all the people I will meet through the UCA. And I just want to thank you so much. You are an answered prayer, and God bless.
Thank you, Damon. Your experience is like many who end up here. It's what Dale spoke about at the end of our conversation. People seeking truth, recognizing the problems with the Trinity, what do they do? Dismiss what they find in Scripture in order to belong to lowercase c Catholic churches? That's not a way to live out your faith. I'm glad we could help you out. Yes, I hope you meet many people, Damon. And one day, I want to meet you myself. Thank you. Write me or send me audio, podcast at UnitarianChristianAlliance.org. I love to hear from you. The UCA Conference in October was amazing. We're currently talking about what next year's plans will be, so stay tuned. Last year, I published the Community Night, the final evening service of the conference, as a podcast episode. This year, it was more humor than it was meeting people. So I'm going to limit this Community Night episode to just a clip or two of the jokes. And I hope, when life slows down a bit, to get a few short interviews with people who were there at the conference and release the Community Night episode as a recap of the conference. If this behind-the-scenes talk of the Evangelical Theological Society event was helpful to you, maybe it made the discussion they had more appreciable and real, then I bet you know a few others who would appreciate it too. Or if you found Dale and Brandon's foray into the Trinitarians' world to be a significant advancement of our cause, and you have some Unitarian friends who would be excited to see the momentum? Or if you're a Trinitarian and still coming to grips with what's going on over here, see Episode 1, The Perilous Trinity Deep Dive. And maybe you want to get a discreet friend involved so that you can talk this through, then do it. Share it. It is happening. The word is spreading, and the internet has accelerated the process. It's done a myriad of terrible things too, so there's that. But how cool is it to be here, watching it unfold? Thank you, Dale and Brandon, for just getting back from a busy, tiring conference and then letting me rope you into this interview the next day. It's a pleasure working alongside the both of you. And thanks to you, listening right now. Be encouraged. Truth will find its way into the hearts that seek it. Be patient, kind, slow to speak. Let your life be the first indication that you've got something right, not your theology. May God bless you in your truth pursuits. I hope this podcast serves you well.